So the first thing I want to do is I just want to look at some of the reasons why you might want to learn web programming. And in particular, I want to compare that against learning how to build mobile apps. So if you were given the choice, you can learn how to build websites or you can learn how to build mobile apps. Which would you choose and why? So there's a lot of compelling reasons for choosing either one, but ultimately I'm a pragmatist and I want what's practical and how am I going to reach the most people the most effectively. And what the research shows, I'm going to show you some of that research in 1 second, but what the research shows is that in the mobile app game, like 90% of app usage is reserved, and it depends upon what source you look at, where you get your statistics, but 90% of app usage is done with like the top 5 to 50 apps, right? So unless you are one of the top apps in the world, top 50, top 5, top 25, the number varies depending upon the source you look at, but unless you're one of the top apps in the world, we'll just say 50, unless you're one of the top 50 apps in the world, most of the traffic you're going to miss, right? Like apps are like Facebook, Yelp, whatever the basic apps, right? Like, and most people use 24 apps on their phone. That's the statistic. 24 apps, that's it. But in the same, the same people, 24 apps on their phone, they'll go to like 10 times that many different websites each month. And so unless you are a huge player who can like create a world-class app which is going to be one of the top apps. It's really something that if you're trying to build something and grow something, it's a very difficult way to get customers, very difficult to acquire and also difficult to retain. And so people are much more readily willing to go check out a website, right? Because going to a website is kind of like meeting somebody like, while you're standing in line at Starbucks. It's like, hey, how are you? What's up? Nice to meet you. Have a good day, right? Like it's easy to meet somebody and just sort of like but like installing an app, that's like inviting them over to your house for dinner. There's much more commitment involved, right? You're putting that thing into your phone. And you have to go through an entire uninstall process if you don't want it. Going to a website, no big deal. So people go to websites much more easily, and they there's much more use of websites. So even though like app usage has skyrocketed in the last 5 years, the web usage has stayed the same and gone up a little bit since 2010. So anyhow, I want to give you the resource which talks about all this in depth because there's this guy who's like done a lot of research into it and he has this really great video and there's a transcript of the article so you could read it if you want. And if you want to read about this in more depth and learn a little bit more about this, it's about a 15-minute video. And one of the things I'm going to give you in this course are a lot of resources. So I'm going to point you towards something which is great. And check that out. That's really going to enhance your knowledge and your skill set. And so that's one of the things I'll be able to provide you with are good resources, good tools to help you do your job as somebody who creates websites to help you do that job really well. All right, so to get to these resources, you could go to this URL right here, right? So it's goo.gl/R3CZXV. So that's just a short URL. And when you get there, you'll have access to, this entire document which I'm looking at. And so here is the article I was telling you about in the video. Should you even learn web dev, websites versus apps? And so this, present some of what I just shared with you. But you could click that and you could take a look at this video and this guy presents all that information in a really great way. And then you could see he's a pretty humorous guy. He's a really good teacher. And then you can see down here there's some really great links down here. So you can check out those links too. I think another thing that I think is good to look at is like this what the web can actually do. And so that's another really nice link right here which shows you, and you could just pause the video and take a look at what the web's able to do versus the things with the X you can do with mobile apps you can't do with the web. So if you want to build something with like a good function, different functionality that's not available in the web, maybe then you'd think about doing an app. But there you go, that's that. And then the next thing is just like, what are the job prospects if you go into build, if you're going to build websites? So in either one, building websites or apps, great job prospects. But in building websites, you could take a look at the different salaries right here by clicking either of these links. And the last thing I'll mention about like learning web programming is, excuse me, if you learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, there's a lot of different boot camps. And one of the most that you could go to, right? And these boot camps will train you and hone your skills in like 3 months or 6 months. And one of the most famous boot camps is one called Hack Reactor in San Francisco. And if you go to Hack Reactor, then they have a 99% placement for all of their graduates. They place them in jobs, and the average salary for the graduates is $105,000. So if you learn HTML and CSS and then take another course and learn JavaScript, and then you apply to Hack Reactor and you go to Hack Reactor for 3 months or 6 months or however long it takes, and they charge you about $20,000 to do that. But when you get done, you'll be placed in a job and you will be making, on average, $105,000. And so that's a really amazing prospect that in 1 year from now, you could be making 100 grand. How awesome is that, right? Learn HTML and CSS, learn JavaScript, and then go to Hack Reactor. And in 1 year, you're making 100 grand. So, here in America, and that's a great pathway. And so I think that that's a really compelling reason to study web programming. All right, so those are just some of my thoughts on web programming versus mobile apps, and why I think it's such a great thing to study web programming. Because mobile apps is really, most people don't realize this, but it's really a niche market reserved for the big players. And unless you're one of those top 25 apps, right, you don't get much traffic. All right, so those are my thoughts on why you're making the right choice and taking this course and learning HTML and CSS.